In this chapter, chapter 8, it goes along very well with chapter 7. Chapter 7 is talking about training. Chapter 8 is talking about development. All right. Now, employee development is that whole idea of preparing people for new jobs and responsibilities. What it's doing is pulling together various things in order to help prepare them for the future. Now, the thing is, many times people have a tendency to confuse training and development. Folks, training ain't development. That's all there is to it. Training is focused on the current job, all right? And it is required. In other words, that's really the supervisor's responsibility to make sure that the person has the tools and the education and the knowledge and everything necessary in order to do the job. Development is for the future. And that is your responsibility as the employee. You are responsible for your development. Do not let somebody else tell you what it is that you need to do for the future. You decide where it is that you want to go and what it is that you want to do as far as your job is concerned. And so development is your responsibility, or the employee's responsibility. Now, one of the things that we've always thought about as far as careers are concerned was like a ladder, a career ladder. In other words, you start at the bottom and you work your way up the various rungs to the various top. One of the things that's happened today is companies are getting much shallower. There aren't nearly as many steps that you can go as far as your career is concerned, moving up a ladder. And so one of the things to think about is what's called a protean career. In other words, think about a lattice, a garden lattice, where you might take a horizontal move over to another job, and then you move up a little bit, and then you take another horizontal move over to another part of the organization, learning the organization. I feel very fortunate. When I was at both Hallmark and at Marion, I learned the business of Hallmark. I learned the business of Marion because, especially at Hallmark, I had a chance to work in every part of the organization except for graphics. I worked with sales. I worked in manufacturing. I worked in materials management, creative. I took various lateral moves to develop my career and learn more about the actual business that's concerned for Hallmark. So one of the things to be thinking about, we start thinking about development. What are some lateral moves, horizontal moves that you can make where you're learning more about the organization? Now, there's various approaches to employee development. You have your formal education, in other words, going to classes or finishing a degree, that sort of thing. You have assessment, in other words, assessing your various skills. Job experiences, where you are taking on different jobs. And then interpersonal relations. What are you doing as far as finding a mentor, finding a coach that goes along with it? Formal education would include workshops and things, training and development centers within the organization, or it might be off-site types of things, various conferences, things like that. Assessments are where people are assessing your skills, knowledge, and abilities on various things, where you might go through an assessment center, where you're put into various situations to see how you would actually react to those situations. Then you have job experiences. One of the things to think about is, what are you doing as far as taking on and volunteering for different projects where you can build skills? My wife was an at-home mom for years, but she was never at home. She was always at the school. She was volunteering. She was room mother. She was president of the PTA. She was on the superintendent's council. She was constantly in the various skills. When our youngest was reaching high school age, she decided to become gainfully employed again. And so she applied for the school district. They sucked her up so fast it was unreal, because the volunteer experiences that she had really did develop her as far as her skills, knowledge, and abilities, and understanding the Blue Springs School District, where she has actually been very, very successful there. I learned a lot about management. I worked at some premier companies, Hallmark, Marion Labs, that sort of thing. I learned a lot about management at those organizations. I learned more about leadership running a Boy Scout troop. Think about it. The kids are there because they need to be there because they want to be there. And so from a leader aspect, I had to make it so that they wanted to be there. They had to be motivated. I had to find the help through volunteer parents and things like that. I learned so much about leadership running a Boy Scout troop, a volunteer type of thing, than I did at some of these premier organizations. You also think about the different assignments, job enlargement and rotation. We've talked about that in previous chapters. Maybe a transfer. Promotions come. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's going to be downward moves. Maybe there's a reduction in force, and you might take a downward move over to another area and learn that area and move up from there. Sabbaticals. Sometimes you can do sabbaticals. Different companies will enable people to take a sabbatical after they've been there for a certain length of time. Where you can get, I remember at Hallmark, the artists and the photographers had the opportunity after, I think it was 5 years, where they could take a month as a sabbatical. And they could go and do anything they wanted, and the company would pay for it. They could go someplace. The whole idea behind it was to kind of recharge the creative areas of the brain and learn new things, be able to bring some of that new creativity to the organization. Another thing to think about, which is really important when it comes to development, is the idea of having a mentor. Okay, you can have mentors in various areas. You don't have to have just one mentor. You can have multiple mentors. You may have one mentor for interpersonal skills, another mentor for technical skills. So it's okay to have multiple mentors. The thing is, you need to go find someone who would be a good mentor for you. The best mentoring is not the formal programs and processes that companies put together. It's a person finding another person who would be a good mentor for them. It could be somebody who is higher in the organization. It could be somebody outside the organization. It could be somebody younger than them because they had the various skills. So it's important to have those interpersonal relationships, and the mentoring is necessary for your development. Another thing to think about is the career management system that the organization might have, where what you're doing is you're keeping track of the skills that all of the various people have, so that you know, here's a skill that's necessary in this part of the organization. Let's match this person up to that need. For that process, you need to have good data gathering. In other words, what are the skills that people have? What are the skills that are going to be necessary for the future? Getting feedback as far as what is it that I have, all right, where I'm strong in, what I'm weak in. Setting goals as far as, okay, so what am I going to do to build the necessary skills for the future? And then having some sort of action planning and follow-up that goes along with it. The data gathering, okay, so what you're doing is you're trying to find out what is it that people are interested in? Where is it that they want to go as far as their career is concerned? What is it that they do well? Getting feedback as far as their level of skills. For example, one of the things that I've done is put together an instrument that a person will fill out that has a bunch of skills on there, and they say, okay, this is where I think my current skill level is. This is where I'd like it to be. And they sit down with their manager, and the manager is sitting there saying, okay, yes, I think your skill level is here, and this is where I think your skill level needs to be, so that they can get some ideas as far as, all right, so what is it that I want to work on for the future? Then you start setting goals. In other words, what skills do I want to be working on? My suggestion to you is, if you're going to start working on skills, pick one or two. That's it. And work on that consistently until you really build up that skill, then pick something else. And then the action planning and follow-up. In other words, all right, so what kind of things have you been doing? Are there things that you could be doing better? Are there other actions that you could possibly be taking? When you start talking about some of the challenges to career development, there is that idea of the glass ceiling, where there is that barrier that's keeping women and minorities from reaching some of those top jobs. a lot of that is based on you need to have people who are in some of those top jobs who can be mentors and advocates for some of those to bring them along. It's just taking time to try to get through that glass ceiling there. Another key concept when you start talking about career development is the idea of succession planning. You need to make sure that you have bench strength, primarily in those key skills that are necessary, where you have senior managers who are in a particular area. Who is it that might be able to take their place if the beer truck runs them over? All right. So in other words, you're thinking about who do we have behind them to take over their jobs if they retire or leave the organization. When you start thinking about the process for developing a good succession plan, you need to identify, first of all, what positions do you really need to plan for? You don't have to plan for all of them. The main ones, the key ones, the more strategic ones are the ones that you want to make sure that you're planning for. Start thinking about people who might be possibilities for those various positions. Thinking about the job requirements for those positions and think about, okay, so what is that person currently doing? What is their current potential? What is their current skill level? Think about developing their development plan, making sure that you're linking any of the succession planning to all of the other HR systems. So in other words, we talked about learning management systems. All right. So you're making sure that you have all of those things linked. You're capturing all of the information as far as where people are at as far as their skill levels. What are their what is it that they want to do for the long term? Things like that. Make sure you're providing feedback to the employees as far as what they're doing, and then measure that plan's effectiveness. Another challenge is dysfunctional managers. There are some managers out there who really shouldn't be in those positions. Maybe they really can't work well with others. They can't be a team player. They're insensitive to others, and I'm sure that you've seen and heard about some of those things. Poor conflict management, things like that. One of the keys that's going to be necessary with those dysfunctional managers is if they can't change, you need to get them out of the organization. That's all there is to it. So those are some key points from Chapter 8. If you have questions, please give me a shout.